Hello! In this video I'm going to show you how to build a simple day counter in iOS. Hi, I'm Jeffers Lewis, and in this video I'm going to show you how to build a simple day counter in iOS using Objective-C and Xcode 9, Xcode 9.2 in fact, and we're using iOS 11 for this. Now this is what the app is going to look like. You launch it and there's going to be this massive label that tells you how many days have passed since a date that we can set with this little view controller here, in which we can pick a date and then we can either cancel out of that or save it. And then as soon as we do save it, the label on the front updates. And this is nice if you want to count how many days your daughter's been on the planet, or how many days it's been since last Christmas was here, or the last spring happened, or like in my case, I'm currently taking this medication here, which is a thyroid medication, because my cancer treatment last year has kind of fried my thyroid, and that means I'm without thyroid hormones, which is not so good. This pill has kind of turned my life around a little bit, but it has long-term effects, so I thought I'm going to make a little diary or a log of how I feel every day, and I do that by saying this is day so-and-so of me being on that medication and this is how I feel about it. And I've realized that after about day 12 I had completely forgotten what day it was, so I thought maybe a little app will help here. So let's see, I've rehearsed this video yesterday and it turns out it's rather long, so I've split it into 3 parts. This is the first part in which we're going to build the app visually with Interface Builder in Xcode. So that means we're going to lay that out and we're going to make sure it kind of works, and then in part 2 we're going to go and start coding in earnest and see how we can create an NS calendar method through which we can extract the date components and subtract one day from another, and then eventually display the amount of elapsed days that are there. And then in part 3 of the video we're going to make sure that once we do set a date on the second view controller, that the first view actually updates properly using the magic of key value observing. So with that all set, let's get started. If you are familiar with Interface Builder in Xcode, then you don't probably need to watch this one, and if you're just more interested in the coding side of things, then feel free to skip ahead. But I'm going to go and create a new Xcode project here under iOS. I'm going to select single view application, and I'm going to call this project day counter. Of course, call it anything you like. My preferred language is Objective-C, so I'm going to choose that. I will untick core data because we don't need that, and the unit test we're not going to use, but I'm going to include them in the project nonetheless. Then on the desktop, this is where I'm going to create the project, and I'm going to make sure this tick box is ticked here where it says create a Git repository on my Mac. And the reason for that is that I can share the code with you on GitHub and provide you a link in the description, which is going to be nice, so you can follow along on this project. Wow, lots of text here, and what I tend to do is create a new tab either by pressing Command T or go into File, New Tab, and that'll provide me with 2 tabs here, much like a browser experience. And the reason why I'm doing that is in the left tab I will be dealing with the code, and on the right hand I will be dealing with the storyboard. So select the storyboard, main.storyboard from the left, and then we can close that pane down, give us a bit more space here. Clutter-free experience, I like it. Well, bring some clutter back on the right hand side by opening this pane and then making this a little bit bigger here. And currently we have that lonely view controller here, and this arrow indicates that this is where the app is going to start. Now I would like for there to be a navigation bar at the top, and the easiest thing to do that is by selecting my view controller, heading over to editor and going embed in navigation controller. And when I do that, then the navigation controller is added to the front of the app. So this is now where the app begins with the navigation controller, and my single view controller now has this navigation bar here. And the beauty of that is that under this department here, which is called the object library, I can just type in I believe bar button. There we go, there's bar button item, and I can add 2 of them right onto here without having to do anything else. Actually, I only need one, don't I? And this one is going to be the one I will call edit. There it is. And if somebody taps on this, I would like another view controller to come up in which we can then set the date. So let's get that going and look for a date. Oh no, actually we need to use a UI view controller. There we go. Not a view, but a view controller. This orange thing here, let's drag that in and position it casually next to that. And now we're going to click on our edit button, hold down the control key and left drag onto our new view controller like this until it turns blue. Then let go and select present modally. And when we do that, then this comes up with a modal, like, you know, sliding up from the bottom and presents this view controller. Now to do anything on this view controller, we need a cancel button here and a save button here. And rather than embedding this pool view controller also into a navigation controller, I will just put a navigation bar at the top here. So let's look for a navigation bar. There we go. This is it, navigation bar, and drag that in. Thank you, Xcode. We didn't want to hear your life story. And to drag that in until not to the very top, because it snaps right into place at the very top here. But if you do that, then it would occlude the kind of battery status and the network status and the time. It would kind of, it would work, but it would just interfere with that. So let's not do that. Let's drag it slightly further down. You see that second line here that appears? That's where it snaps into place, and that's where we're going to leave it. Now the other thing that we need are these two bar button items, much like the edit button here. We're going to have a cancel button here and a save button here. So let's go and see if we can find that bar button item again. There we go. There's one goes here and the other one goes here. And then with either of them selected under the, what's it called, the properties inspector, attributes inspector even, under system item, let's pick cancel. And here we're going to pick done or save perhaps. Let's do save. Perfect. Under title here, we don't have to just be with title. We can just say pick a date or pick a start date or select a start date. Remember, pick a date. Select a start date. It's all about the fine nuances. You know. There we go. Select a start date, and the only thing that is missing here now is a big date picker in the middle. So let's look for that down here, date picker, and drag that in right into the middle until it snaps right into place there. Very exciting. Now by default, the date picker picks or lets us choose the date as well as the time. We don't really need a time. We can modify the mode and just say date, and that is really all we need here. That's our settings view controller done. Now let's go back to our main view controller here and add a couple of labels here. One is a day label. That's just going to say day. So let's just go and say label. There it is. That's going to be somewhere here. And instead of label, I will make it say day. And I will also center that and perhaps adjust the font to something slightly bigger, so perhaps 40. It's now no longer visible because the writing is bigger than the actual word, than the actual label, sorry. Drag that out so that it reaches both the ends here. And with that selected, I can now go and alt drag down so that I select the copy of this. You don't have to do that. You can drag another label into this, but it now already has all the properties of this label associated here. So that makes my life a little bit easier. So that is going to be a really big fat label. So perhaps I'm going to use something like 100 here. Make that a bit bigger so that none of the characters are cut off. And I'm going to drag that right into the middle. And just so that we get a bit of an impression, I think something like a 5-digit number in here would suffice. I don't think we're going to have anything that counts 6-digit day. So let's go for 99999. And that's what it looks like. That's what it looks like in Interface Builder. What it's going to look like on the real device, we there's two ways of doing it. Either just launch the app and see what it looks like and see if it looks okay, or we can go and use our assistant editor up here. Click on that, and by default it comes up with the interface builder on the left and code on the right if it's set to automatic. But if we set that to preview and then select our main storyboard, then we're going to get an accurate, more or less accurate preview of what this is going to look like on a real device. So that's kind of interesting. On the iPhone 8 in portrait, it looks like this. With that little plus sign on the bottom, we can add different iPhone types or different screen sizes to this view. So I have a smaller iPhone, which is the iPhone SE, or more specifically the iPhone 5S I have. And if I select that, then I can see that this label is kind of cut off on the right. So that's not really what I want. So that's probably due to two things. One is that the font may be a little bit too large, and the other thing is that we don't have any constraints set up here. So the other thing, of course, is if I turn any of these to landscape mode, then the label isn't really centered in the middle here anymore, and this here doesn't even show it up anymore. So let's work on that. In fact, let me just display this, and then we can see what we can do here. At this point, I must admit I'm always struggling a little bit because auto layout and constraints, they're not my friends. But as far as I remember, I can select both labels and then head over into editor again and say embed in a stack view. And what that'll do is it'll combine these two labels into one. And that means I only have to set up one set of constraints. And I can also treat the whole stack view as one unit and position that right in the center of the view. And if I do that, then this still looks a little bit cut off here, but also Xcode is giving me that little warning that says, hey, I have missing constraints here. And rather than deal with those and let Xcode auto fix that, there's another way that we can deal with this manually with a bit more control, and that is with our stack view selected. Let's head over to that little square button right on the bottom of the screen and say add new constraints. And if we see that, then we can pick anything that we like here. So in my case, I think 38 on the left looks nice. Perhaps 38 on the right is also going to look nice. This is really just a matter of trying it out and seeing what happens. So as soon as one of these lights up in orange, then that means that constraint will be set. And I like at the top here as well, I could set this to 186, or I can set this to 120, and then and the bottom will just, we'll just see what happens. Let's see if adding 3 constraints will work. Well, it certainly made this look better. It made this look really nasty. If that is the case, we can always go and select the constraints and remove them again, and then we can start again and see that perhaps, whoops, of course with the stack view selected, we can see that perhaps 38 was a bit too narrow. Perhaps we'll try 0 instead, and 120 at the top. Use canvas value, we'll see what happens there. Add 3 constraints, and there we go, that looks much better. This is not exactly in the middle now, but the cool thing is it still looks good in landscape, at least on the iPhone 8, and here we can at least read the label. Not too concerned about that. If you know how to do this, do let me know, because I have yet to find documentation that actually explains in a way that I can understand it how this works. So it's one of those things. I will leave it as it is for now, because we can read the label on both models of the phone. Good. Case closed. Let's head over to this thing again here on the editor, and instead of preview, select automatic and view controller, or view controller implementation file rather, because we need to build some references to these things. The edit button is already taken care of. That will bring up my settings view controller, but we need to be able to speak to our days label, and so that we can do that, select it either from here or from the list. If it's a little bit difficult to select it here in the stack view, select it from the list and then control drag from it into your code. Make sure this says viewcontroller.m for implementation file, and drag it anywhere between the interface and end statement here. And when you do that, this selects an outlet, and let's call this a days label, just days label, so that I know how to talk to it from code. that's that. Now let's do the same thing for our other view controller, for the settings view controller. Select it up here. And first of all, this is now going to bring up the header file of the standard UI view controller. That's not what we want, because we want our particular class to be associated with that. And let me see if I've created one already here. No, I have not. I need a specific class for that. And in order to do that, I will just go and head over to File, New File, and select iOS Cocoa Touch class, and let's call this settings view controller. Make sure it's a subclass of the UI view controller. Hit next and put it into our folder, and that'll create a header and an implementation file in Objective-C. So now when we select that main storyboard again, then we can associate in the identity inspector, we can then call our class here and go settings view controller, and that will bring up this code, which is now our clean brand new class. Let's get rid of this on the bottom here and make sure we implement both these buttons, the cancel button, so control drag from cancel somewhere to the bottom of the code here and call it cancel button pressed. This will create a method stub that when somebody clicks this button, this method will be called. And likewise for the save button, same thing, control drag from the save button and drag it into the code and call it save button pressed. Hey presto. The only other thing that we need a reference to is the date picker. So let's select it and control drag. If you drag it into here, this would also create a method stub, which we don't need. But as soon as somebody has picked the date, that method stub would go here, and it did that object. In fact, does send a message once it's finished. But we really only need to be able to read out the value. So all we need is a property. So let's drag it in between interface and end, and create an outlet and call it date picker. Great, so that's the code setup. Now before we test the app in an emulator, I just want to make sure I put a little bit of code into the cancel and save buttons here, because otherwise this view controller never goes away. So in testing, this is a nice touch to have, and it's very easy to do. It's just a method on self, dismiss view controller animated yes, completion is nil. That's all we need to say. And in fact, the same goes for the save button for now. And we'll go and in fact, let me comment my code so that we know what this is. Dismiss the view controller. And then the same thing happens here. Dismiss the view controller. And then go self dismiss view controller animated yes, and completion nil. Perfect. Let's see how this app looks like on perhaps on my iPhone 5S. There we go. Perfect. Run it and we'll see what it works. We'll see what it looks like. Okay, so far so good. The label displays okay, so that's one worry that I had. I'm glad it works fine. If I click the edit button, then this view controller comes up, and I can go and hit cancel or save, and I can even play with the date picker here. Perfect, that seems to be working fine. So in the second part of this video, I'd like to be able to set a date, hit save, and that should then update accordingly. And of course, if I switch off the phone and close the app, then I would like my elapsed days to come up again. So that was it for this part. Join me in part 2 and we're going to start coding in earnest. If you like this video, of course, share it with friends, family, and total strangers. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in part 2. Take care.